The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear. For countless millennia, the Galactic Empire ruled without challenge, a leviathan stretched across thousands of star systems, suffocating every species it touched. Its fleets darkened skies, its decrees reshaped cultures, and its justice was absolute. Entire civilizations bent beneath its weight until their histories were erased, leaving only loyalty to the throne. For the Empire, domination was not simply power, it was permanence. It had always ruled, and it believed it always would. When humanity first rose into the stars, they were an oddity, fragile and new, too young to matter in the grand tapestry of galactic order. The Empire expected another race to assimilate, obey, and eventually fade into obscurity. But instead of compliance, humanity resisted. They were small, scattered, and underdeveloped compared to older species, yet they fought with a ferocity that unsettled the Empire's oldest admirals. Battles that should have been decided in moments stretched into grinding wars of attrition. Fleets meant to crush Earth found themselves returning in fragments. The Empire had met countless adversaries, but none had fought with such reckless ingenuity, turning desperation into strategy, weakness into weapons, and sacrifice into victory. The Empire called them savages. Unpredictable. Dangerous. In truth, they were correct, though they never grasped the reason. Humanity was a species that had never known stability. Every step of its history was forged through struggle, every generation hardened by the knowledge that survival was not guaranteed. That perspective shaped their war. Where the Empire fought to preserve control, humans fought because they refused to bow, because they had no concept of surrender when existence itself was always contested. The war between humans and the Empire escalated faster than any in recorded memory. What began as a series of border disputes soon turned into a storm of fire stretching across sectors. Humanity, fewer in number, leaned on speed and cunning. Their ships were not as strong, their worlds not as fortified, but every defeat seemed to birth 3 more victories. Every human fleet destroyed left behind survivors who carried intelligence back home, innovating new tactics, modifying weapons, refusing to stagnate. To the Empire, such persistence was madness. To humans, it was instinct. Still, war carries weight. Humanity bled heavily. Colonies burned. Civilian convoys were torn apart. The cost of resistance mounted, and there were moments when even the bravest whispered doubts. Yet with every crushing defeat, new voices rose from the ashes, swearing vengeance. The Empire could destroy fleets, but it could not extinguish will. And so the war stretched, a thorn in the Empire's pride, a humiliation for its rulers, a question it could not answer. Why would such a weak species refuse to break? The answer began to form in whispers, in the hidden councils of humanity's strategists, in the quiet halls where generals spoke not of survival, but of how to dismantle an empire far larger than themselves. It was there that the seeds of bait were planted. The plan was audacious, even suicidal, but humanity had always thrived on wagers no sane empire would dare make. The first move came in the form of sacrifice. During one of the Empire's most decisive battles, 3 human generals, figures of authority, architects of victories, were captured. Their capture was not by accident. To the Empire, it seemed a masterstroke, the moment the war would finally tip. They paraded the news across their networks, announcing to every subject world that the human resistance had lost its guiding minds. The generals were to be executed publicly, not quietly on some forgotten prison moon, but before the eyes of billions, a spectacle of humiliation designed to shatter humanity's morale. The method chosen was archaic by galactic standards, hanging. Crude, primitive, but deliberate. The Empire had studied human psychology enough to know the symbolism. Hanging was not merely death, it was degradation, a message that humanity's leaders would die not as warriors, but as criminals. Alien worlds buzzed with anticipation. Cities prepared to broadcast the event in plazas, taverns, and family homes. Leaders across the galaxy prepared speeches, framing it as the end of a dangerous chapter. For the Empire, it was theater. For humanity, it was opportunity. The generals went to captivity not with despair but with silence, for they knew their role in the greater design. Their deaths would not be an end but a signal. The Empire misunderstood humanity's relationship with sacrifice. For them, the loss of leaders was catastrophic, the unraveling of order. For humans, leaders could die, and others would rise. A soldier could fall, but the fight would continue. Martyrdom was not weakness, it was fuel. The Empire mistook execution as humiliation, when for humanity, death in defiance was the sharpest blade. As preparations for the execution grew, so too did the arrogance of the Empire. Propagandas spread across the stars. Posters, holograms, and broadcasts proclaimed the end of resistance. Alien officials held feasts. Military commanders boasted in public addresses of the swift victory that would follow. They mocked humanity as an uncivilized people finally taught their place. In private, however, unease flickered among the sharpest minds. Why had the humans allowed their generals to be captured? Why had resistance movements not fractured without them? Why did human fleets continue to fight with strange precision, as though their chain of command remained intact? These questions were buried beneath the tide of arrogance. The Empire was too vast, too powerful, too certain to doubt its own narrative. It ignored the warnings. That ignorance was precisely what humanity counted on. The trap deepened as execution day neared. Alien merchants sold souvenirs, marking the occasion. Songs were composed. Billions prepared to witness the spectacle live through hollow broadcasts. Children of subject species were taught to recite verses celebrating the fall of mankind. The execution was to be more than punishment. It was to be a rewriting of memory, a moment etched forever as the day the human threat was crushed. Yet far from the alien capital, in hidden stations, asteroid bases, and cloaked fleets, humanity prepared. Their forces had been waiting for this moment. The generals, seemingly broken prisoners, carried with them the final key. Within their implants and uniforms, embedded so deeply the Empire never thought to search, were codes, encryption seeds, and timed transmissions that would synchronize with the moment of their deaths. The noose was not an ending, it was a circuit. Still, the Empire remained blind. In its confidence, it grew careless. It underestimated the humans not once but endlessly, never realizing that every humiliation, every battle, every life taken had only sharpened resolve. Humanity had learned long ago that survival required the transformation of pain into strength, and so even this, especially this, was turned into a weapon. The day of the execution arrived, and the galaxy held its breath. Across thousands of systems, screens flickered to life, projectors lit plazas, and entire populations gathered in anticipation of a spectacle the Empire promised would mark the end of the human problem forever. The alien rulers had designed every detail with care, not only to destroy 3 generals, but to annihilate the idea of human resistance itself. The stage was a colossal platform suspended above the central square of the Empire's capital, framed by towering spires etched with the symbols of dominance. Lights blazed upon it so no shadow could soften the act about to unfold. The crowd filled the avenues, their roars amplified by speakers, so the entire city shook with anticipation. Billions more tuned in from distant worlds, convinced they were about to witness history. The 3 generals were marched out under heavy guard, their restraints clinking as the alien soldiers forced them forward. To the watching galaxy, they appeared broken, thin, silent. To the crowd, this was confirmation of weakness. They wanted to see humanity humbled, its champions stripped of dignity, its warriors reduced to nothing. The aliens jeered, spat, and sang victory chants, while dignitaries of conquered worlds raised glasses in celebratory feasts. All across the stars, enemies of mankind smiled. The Empire's propaganda machine whispered the same message into every mind. Humanity had fought fiercely, but now it knelt. Yet beneath the noise and celebration, something invisible stirred. The moment was being measured not by alien rulers, but by human strategists hidden light years away. Within the uniforms of the condemned, within implants disguised as scars of battle, codes waited like sleeping predators. Every camera angle, every data stream from the stage, carried more than images. Buried within the execution's very broadcast were seeds of invasion, invisible signals interlaced with the feed, crawling silently through the Empire's own networks. The stage was not simply a place of death, it was the heart of a weapon. The executioner, an alien commander with medals draped across his chest, stood tall before the generals. His voice carried across the square, magnified so all could hear his proclamation. He declared the crimes of humanity: defiance, rebellion, savagery. He spoke of billions of lives lost because of human stubbornness, of the chaos they had sown. His speech was thunderous, confident, triumphant. Every word was meant to remind the galaxy that order was restored, that resistance was futile, that the Empire's will was absolute. The crowd cheered each condemnation, their roars rising like waves. Yet even as the commander spoke, human ships lurked silent and unseen in asteroid belts, fleets poised in ambush, crews waiting for a single signal. The ropes were prepared, thick and coarse, relics of a method so old it was alien even to most species watching. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Hanging was not about swift death. It was about humiliation, about displaying bodies as warnings, about making a spectacle of fragility. The Empire had studied this carefully, believing it would wound the human spirit more than disintegration or execution by beam. They believed humans feared this method most. What they did not understand was that humanity had already transformed the meaning of the noose. To them, it was not humiliation but sacrifice. Not shame but defiance. The generals were placed beneath the gallows. The crowd grew silent, their anticipation sharpening into hunger. Billions leaned forward to witness the moment of collapse, the final humiliation of mankind. The executioner pulled the lever. The platforms beneath the generals fell away. Ropes tightened, necks snapped, and the bodies swayed against the light of alien victory. The square erupted with thunderous cheers. Across the galaxy, trillions celebrated. The Empire rejoiced in its own theater of dominance, convinced it had killed not only 3 humans but the spirit of an entire species. At that precise second, the trap detonated, not with fire but with silence. The moment the generals' pulses ceased, their implants transmitted one last burst of encrypted data. It raced invisibly through the very channels the Empire used to broadcast its triumph. It leapt from relay to relay, worming through satellites, embedding itself into the heart of the Empire's communication grid. Billions of viewers never realized that as they watched, they had become unwilling participants in a cascade of cybernetic warfare unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The executions had not been the end, they were the trigger. Suddenly, alien warships orbiting the capital flickered. Lights across their hulls dimmed. Engines stalled. Targeting arrays went blind. Entire fleets lost cohesion as encrypted orders scrambled into chaos. Admirals barked commands that never reached their crews. Ground defenses shut down in the middle of their victory parades. The Empire's communication networks, once flawless, now became conduits for collapse. At the edges of known space, humanity's fleets surged into motion. They had waited in silence for this moment, engines cold, weapons charged. Now, with the Empire's networks fractured, they struck. Coordinated attacks erupted across sectors. Shipyards that had supplied alien fleets for centuries were obliterated in moments. Command centers found their systems locked, their fleets suddenly deaf and blind. Outposts, once considered impregnable, fell within hours. The Empire had believed itself unassailable. In a single breath, it was stripped bare. Back on the capital, confusion replaced triumph. The cheers of the crowd faltered as the skies above flickered with explosions. Alien commanders tried to restore order, but their systems betrayed them. Dignitaries stared in horror as screens meant to show victory instead displayed collapsing fleets and burning worlds. The execution, intended to cement dominance, had become the symbol of the Empire's undoing. The very act of hanging the generals had flipped the balance of war. For humanity, the trap was more than strategic brilliance. It was psychological warfare perfected. Every alien who had tuned in to watch humiliation instead watched the Empire itself humiliated. Billions who had cheered the death of humans now whispered in fear. Species long crushed under the Empire's rule saw weakness, where they had once seen invincibility. Rebellion kindled across star systems not because humanity asked, but because the illusion of invulnerability had shattered. The Empire's greatest strength was not its fleets, but the belief that resistance was impossible. That belief now lay broken. The generals' bodies swung lifeless, but their sacrifice reverberated louder than any living speech. Their silence became humanity's loudest roar. The noose that was meant to destroy spirit became the banner of defiance, broadcast across every screen, every system. The crowd that had gathered to revel in human defeat instead became the first to witness the crumbling of their own empire. Fear spread faster than fire. Alien leaders scrambled for explanations, but none made sense. How could primitives cripple their networks? How could captured prisoners wield such reach? They sought technical answers, but the truth was deeper. Arrogance had blinded them. They had never considered that humans would use their own moment of triumph as the battlefield. They had never understood that sacrifice was not weakness but strength.